And so, Madam President, I yield the floor.
Senator from Alabama.
Madam President, I thank the chair and would thank Senator Klobuchar for allowing me to go a few minutes ahead of her, and would ask to be notified after 10 minutes, if that would.
Without objection, the chair will notify you.
Madam President, I want to talk about recent rulings in the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Repository litigation. I'm ranking member of the Environment and Public Works Subcommittee on the Clean Air and Nuclear Safety Subcommittee. I'm ranking on that subcommittee, and so this is a matter which I've followed closely. And we just had a hearing this morning with the entire Nuclear Regulatory Commission board and its new chairman before us. So these decisions are not simply political decisions, of course. They're legal decisions that adjudicated certain legal disputes that have been simmering for a number of years. The Court's judgments were founded on law, not politics or nuclear policy. It adjudicated certain contested legal matters. But from my perspective, it was an affirmation of plain law against plain defiance of law, and the Court really made that clear. So last August, the D.C. Circuit, in the case of In re Aiken County, rendered a decision that provided a clear legal victory to proponents of nuclear energy in America. More importantly, it was a victory for the rule of law and the United States taxpayer, and a victory for the rightful power of Congress to adjudicate and legislate on energy policy. Its judgment also rendered a resounding defeat for the policies advocated by the current administration, the majority leader of the United States Senate, and other politicians who have worked for years to thwart the law by refusing or blocking actions to implement the Nuclear Policy Act, which is the law of the land. More recently, in November of 2013, the D.C. Circuit issued another ruling in the case of National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners versus the United States Department of Energy. These commissioners around the United States sued the Department of Energy. Representing our states, these commissioners did, and that court found that the current administration, the Obama administration, has been ignoring the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. The D.C. Circuit ordered the Energy Department to stop charging U.S. ratepayers $750 million a year in nuclear waste fees until the federal government complies with the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. As a result, on January 3rd, just a few weeks ago, the Secretary of Energy was forced to formally submit a proposal to Congress to reduce the nuclear waste fee to zero, to end the fee, while at the same time asking the D.C. Circuit to reconsider, please, the ruling it is rendered, which I don't think it will, because he's collecting the money and not using it properly. So taken together, these two rulings vindicate the concerns that many of us have raised since 2009 about the lawless actions of this administration in failing to deal with our nation's nuclear waste in the manner required by law. I hear all the time people wonder how in the world the President doesn't comply with the law. He amends the Health Care Act and does other such things that most Americans are just taken aback at. They can't imagine how he's not bound by the law like everyone else. And of course, he is. Indeed, he takes an oath to ensure that the laws of the United States are faithfully carried out. So the background. Over 30 years ago, Congress passed the Nuclear Waste Policy Act to require the federal government to accept nuclear waste from commercial nuclear reactors around the country with the objective of safely storing it in a single permanent geologic repository that's safe and secure. Congress also created the Nuclear Waste Fund to collect the fees that were extracted from the nuclear power electric generating companies. The money is taken from them, which they take from the ratepayers, and that money was to be used to cover the cost of this program. So far, the federal government has collected $25 billion for this fund at a rate of about $750 million a year. In 1987, Congress passed and President Reagan signed into law a law that amended the Nuclear Waste Act by officially, at that point, designating Yucca Mountain, Nevada, as the nation's geologic repository for spent nuclear fuel. Then in July of 2002, Congress, overriding Nevada's objections, their representatives didn't like it, although I would note the area of Nevada where this facility is to be in place strongly support it, and they oppose Nevada leaders who oppose building it. And so Congress overrode the objections and passed a joint resolution that said this, quote, resolved by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that there hereby is approved the site at Yucca Mountain, Nevada for a repository, close quote. So in 2008, the U.S. Energy Department submitted to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission an 8,600-page application for authorization to construct the repository, discussing every possible complaint and concern that could be raised and analyzing all the issues. So Section 114 of the Act states that once the application is received by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, it, quote, shall issue a final decision approving or disproving the issuance of a construction authorization not later than the expiration of 3 years after the date of the submission of such application. So this was in 2008, and they have not rendered a decision since. So this means the NRC is under a clear legal duty as set out in statute, passed by Congress, signed by the President, to promptly complete the licensing process for Yucca. Regrettably, in 2009, the Obama administration and its allies orchestrated a complex scheme to ignore the law, to control the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and shut down the Yucca Mountain process. How was this done? Well, here's how the federal court judge, Judge Raymond Randolph, described the administration's scheme. This is a dramatic and crystal clear language. It blows a whistle on one of the most significant obstructions of law that I've seen in my time in Washington. It says this, quote, this is what the judge found, quote, former NRC Chairman Gregory Jaczko orchestrated a systematic campaign of noncompliance. Jaczko unilaterally ordered Commission staff to terminate the Yucca review process in October of 2010, instructed staff to remove key findings from reports evaluating the Yucca Mountain site, and ignored the will of his fellow commissioners, close quote. That's a dramatic indictment of Mr. Jaczko's leadership. I would just note parenthetically that Mr. Jaczko was the choice of Majority Leader Reid. He'd worked on Senator Reid's staff, and he insisted that Mr. Jaczko be made the chairman of the commission. So beginning in 2009, now former Chairman Jaczko was able to effectively block any further progress on Yucca Mountain. That is, until the D.C. Circuit finally ruled in August of last year that those actions were in clear violation of the law, which was an important victory for the rule of law and for the power of Congress. In its ruling, the D.C. Circuit determined, quote, that the NRC has continued to violate the law governing the Yucca Mountain licensing process, close quote. The court then highlighted that the NRC had gone well beyond missing statutory deadline for completing review of the licensing application, recognizing that, quote, Congress has not altered the legal landscape, close quote, That is, Congress has not amended the Waste Policy Act. The court explained that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is, quote, simply flouting the law, close quote. The court granted the request of the plaintiffs in the case for, quote, a writ of mandamus against the NRC, a writ rarely issued that orders a governmental body to comply with the law, and held that the NRC, quote, must promptly continue with the legally mandated licensing process. This was important with the constitutional order of America. And completing Yucca has big implications for the federal budget. As a ranking member of the Budget Committee, we need to watch every dime we raise and spend. So we have already spent, amazingly, $15 billion, according to the Government Accountability Office, evaluating Yucca and other sites and doing work at the site. We've already paid $2 billion as of January 12th for claims resulting from the government's failure to deal with the waste site. In other words, people have sued and made claims against the government for not fulfilling its obligation to build this site, and we've already paid out $2 billion. It's a shame people can't be held individually responsible for obstructing the law and causing the federal taxpayers to pay out $2 billion. According to the Congressional Research Service, the federal government's total liability for breach of contract claims from the failure to resolve the long-term waste issue could reach $50 billion. You see, the government agreed and set up a method to receive these waste. The electric companies who use nuclear power are now being forced for decades to keep the waste on site at great expense, even though they paid the billions of dollars into the fund to make sure it's taken care of at a single site. With this important court victory, we may hope and expect that the nation's nuclear waste program can be put back on track, and it's hurting right now. But the costs are real, and they fall on virtually all Americans. So this issue is critical to the future of nuclear power in America. We need to get this waste depository issue settled, and I believe the NRC should expeditiously proceed with the Yucca license proceeding in an independent manner worthy of the important task they've been assigned. And I'm hopeful that if we do so, we may have turned a final corner. And I will note that the members of the board are good people, and I think the new chairman is going to try to do a much better job, Chairman McFarland. But it was unbelievable how the former chairman was able to obstruct plain law. The NRC should be able to proceed promptly with completing the license process, but if they fail to do so, the NRC chairman or the entire commission could be held in contempt of court, and appropriate sanctions could be issued by the court, and should be if they fail. And that was discussed this morning at the hearing. The commission says they're going to move forward. They say they don't have as much money as they'd like to have, but they haven't asked for more money. They have a duty to fix this problem and deal with it, and if they need more money, they should ask for it. After all these years and the money spent, a contempt citation would be a colossal failure and a tremendous embarrassment, and it would be a result of a willful failure to follow the clear responsibility of law. Madam President, I would ask consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
I thank the chair and would yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Minnesota.
Madam President, I thank my colleague from Alabama for making his remarks a bit briefer, and thank him as well for accompanying me to the State of the Union 2 nights ago. With that, I rise today to urge a vote in the Senate to confirm the nominee to be Minnesota's next U.S. Attorney. I would also note I see my colleague and friend from Iowa here, Senator Grassley, who has been working hard on his good nominee as well for Iowa, and we've been working on this together. When you look at the extraordinary circumstances under which the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Minnesota has been operating, it will be clear why a vote on this nomination and getting this done is so important. For 2.5 years, 883 days, Minnesota has not had a full-time U.S. attorney. During those years, from August 2011 to August 2013, B. Todd Jones was responsible for doing 2 jobs as the Minnesota U.S. Attorney and as acting director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. And I would note that, as Senator Grassley has pointed out, it's been a difficult time in the office while they continue to do good work, in part because the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota, which is great prosecutors, did not have a full-time manager during this time, pending the approval of the ATF job and during the appointment time. Over the summer, the Senate, as you know, Madam President, confirmed Todd Jones as director of the ATF, the first permanent director in 7 years. He left the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's position open. Senator Franken and I, in consultation with getting a recommendation from a bipartisan U.S. Attorney Advisory Committee, which included the former Republican-appointed U.S. Attorney under both the first George Bush and the second George Bush, served on our advisory board, and we recommended Andy Lugar, a respected litigator and former assistant U.S. attorney, to fill the position. We recommended him 191 days ago. It has been about 6 months, 183 days, since Director Jones left, and we still do not have a permanent full-time U.S. attorney. Minnesota needs a full-time U.S. attorney. It's a major jurisdiction, and Andy Lugar has the experience and know-how necessary to do this job well. From his days fighting white-collar crime as an assistant U.S. attorney to his work with Minnesota law enforcement to help improve their gang-fighting strategy, Andy has earned the respect of the legal and law enforcement communities. Throughout his career, he has proven to be a tireless advocate for the people of Minnesota. As an assistant U.S. attorney, he successfully prosecuted organized crime, drug, and white-collar cases. This included the prosecution of a $150 million national real estate and investment fraud case, leading to the longest white-collar sentence in the U.S. at that time. In 2009, he was appointed by the Minnesota Commissioner of Public Safety to lead an investigation into the Metro Gang Strike Force and uncovered a series of problems with the unit, recommended that the unit be disbanded and replaced by other law enforcement efforts, and it was, in fact, abolished. In fact, a Star Tribune editorial said that Andy's review of the strike force made, quote, smart recommendations about the Twin Cities' next generation gang fighting strategy, end quote, and that his report included welcome measures to begin the long process of rebuilding the public's trust. Andy is well respected in the law enforcement community. I can tell you, after we made the recommendation to the President, I got nothing but positive words from police chiefs and others who are excited about him in this job. He is committed to building and maintaining strong working relationships and partnerships between federal and local law enforcement. In addition to his many years as a federal prosecutor, Andy has had a distinguished career in private practice. He is currently a partner at the Green Espo law firm, where he is well regarded as a highly skilled trial lawyer focused on business litigation, representing businesses, and white-collar defense. He has been selected as one of Minnesota's top 100 super lawyers for the past 10 years and as one of the best lawyers in America for the past 4 years. He clearly has the experience, character, and drive to lead such a premier law enforcement agency as the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office. The Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office represents the U.S. with professionalism, high ethical standards, and an unwavering commitment to the safety of our community. These prosecutors work to protect public safety by focusing on offenders who do the most harm to the community: terrorists, the worst of the worst violent criminals, and drug traffickers, and major financial fraudsters. They also work closely with law enforcement locally to ensure local and federal resources are used efficiently and effectively. I personally know this as having served as the chief prosecutor for Minnesota's largest county, Hennepin County, for 8 years, and I worked daily with our U.S. Attorney. We would discuss which office would handle cases. During the Moussaoui investigation, as people recall, we got in Minnesota the hijacker that survived, the guy that tried to learn how to down a plane and was caught and imprisoned, and that came out of Minnesota immediately after 9/11. The office was very focused on the terrorism investigation, and my office, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, then stepped in and took some major white-collar cases to help out. We have a tradition of working together throughout the years, and that's why this office is so important to me. Examples: the office won a conviction in a $3.65 billion Ponzi scheme, the second biggest Ponzi scheme in U.S. history. It has an ongoing terrorism investigation that has led to charges against 18 people for aiding the terrorist organization Al-Shabaab, 8 of whom have been convicted, some receiving sentences of up to 20 years in prison. If you can imagine this, they are conducting major terrorism investigations and prosecutions, and we need a full-time U.S. attorney to make decisions and to be in charge. Other major accomplishments include Operation High Life, was a major drug trafficking investigation involving more than 100 local, state, and federal law enforcement officers and resulted in 26 indictments, 25 guilty pleas, and sentences up to 200 months in prison. Operation Brothers Keeper was a successful investigation and prosecution of a RICO case involving a regional 200-member gang which took 22 dangerous criminals off the street. Operation Malverde received national attention and was a prosecution of 27 defendants associated with the Mexican drug cartel, including the apprehension of the cartel's regional leader and sentences as high as 20 years in prison. The office also recently played a key role in shutting down a major synthetic drug seller in Duluth. This head shop was a huge problem. The perpetrator, who has been convicted and is awaiting sentencing, they literally found over $700,000 in his bathroom hidden in small plastic bags. They went after this head shop. They prosecuted that guy. They won that case. They deserve a leader. Andy Lugar is the right person for this job. The Judiciary Committee agreed and reported out his nomination without objection on January 9th, and I appreciate the service of the presiding officer as well as Senator Grassley, who is here on our Judiciary Committee, and I appreciate the support for his nomination. I also supported the nomination of the U.S. Attorney from Iowa, and we know how important that job is as well. This is a position, the U.S. Attorney, the founders first regarded as so vital that they created it during the very first Congress, a position so crucial that it was born in the same law as the structure of the United States Supreme Court, a position so necessary that President Zachary Taylor filled it within 2 days of Minnesota becoming a state. Well, in our case, for a variety of reasons, we have now gone 883 days without a full-time U.S. attorney. This is our moment. We need to move ahead on this nomination. Again, I appreciate Senator Grassley's help in moving these nominations forward. We have 2 U.S. attorneys, 2 federal marshals. I can just say that Andy Lugar is a dedicated public servant whose breadth of experience, strength of character, and commitment to justice make him a well-qualified candidate to serve as Minnesota's next U.S. attorney. I don't think there's any objections to his nomination, but I do urge my colleagues to support his confirmation and give this office the leader they deserve, as well as the District of Iowa. Thank you very much, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Senator from Iowa.
I had a chance to listen to the senator from Minnesota, and I come to speak on another subject, but I want to assure her that we will get these 2 nominees and others across the finish line so that the U.S. Attorney for Minnesota can go to work, hopefully, before we get many more days added to the 800 she's already talked about. The Farm Bill process has been very long, very hard, and no doubt frustrating for all who have been involved. Some of us on the Senate Ag Committee have participated in 2 committee markups and 2 floor debates for this bill, and that's over a period of 2 Congresses. I voted for and supported the bill at every one of those junctures. I believe our country needs a good farm policy, which means, of course, an adequate and yet limited safety net for farmers, because so much about farming is beyond the control of the farmers, and I'm not talking just about natural disasters. Without a doubt, our farmers then face real uncontrollable risk every year. The Farm Bill provides farmers then with a number of programs to mitigate risk. Agriculture remains a changing industry. Unbelievable technological advancements are taking place right before our eyes. Farmers can now control irrigation equipment and monitor grain bins on the phone from the other side of the world. Agricultural technology is progressing so quickly. 5 years from now, when we debate the next Farm Bill, autonomous tractors may well be doing a considerable amount of the field work in America. Farm policy has also changed over time. Unfortunately, the majority of farm program benefits have started going to a concentrated number of farmers. The fact is, 10% of the farmers, and those obviously would be the wealthy farmers, get 70% of the benefits from a farm bill. One reason for this is that the current farm policy offers farmers essentially unlimited subsidies if they hire the right lawyers. As a farmer, a citizen, and a legislator, I believe it is wrong to expect or even to allow the government to give unlimited support to my farm or any farm, especially since our country has a record $17 trillion national debt. During the first full Senate farm debate in the summer of 2012, so the last Congress, my payment limit reform was adopted by a vote of 75 to 24 here on the floor of this very body. During the first round of floor debate in the House, Mr. Fortenberry, this Congress, Mr. Fortenberry from Nebraska, offered the same reforms, and they were adopted there in the House by a vote of 230 to 194. Congress has spoken then and overwhelmingly agrees in both bodies with my common sense approach of limitations on the amount that one farming operation can get. Now, wouldn't you think, wouldn't anyone think that policy which is widely supported in both bodies of Congress and which saves taxpayers nearly $400 million would be untouchable when it comes to a conference committee? The rules of this institution, the Senate, outline that. Senate Rule 28, if anyone would like to look it up. However, once again, behind closed doors, Washington decided to intentionally screw up common sense. This conference bill increases the payments available through countercyclical program, now called Price Loss Coverage, or PLC for short, by 150% compared to what this Congress had already agreed upon. And yet, I have anyone to tell me a single legitimate reason why that change could be made. Additionally, the powers that be in this town have proven they learn nothing from the World Trade Organization Brazil cotton case. That dispute has resulted in the U.S. paying a $143 million fine per year to Brazilian cotton farmers because our farm program for cotton doesn't meet the rules of international trade. Now, this farm bill doubles down on the same market-distorting principles that brought us that very same trade dispute. The original payment limit reforms that this Congress approved also eliminated abuses through what is commonly known as quote-unquote actively engaged loophole. To sum up this loophole, it makes it very easy for non-farmers to get farm subsidies, probably those that go to the extent to hire a lawyer. This results in the largest 10% of the farms then, as I said before, getting 70% of the farm program's benefits, as I've already mentioned. Yet, the Conference Committee, in another brazen act of manipulation, eliminates my simple enforceable reform. Because I happen to think that non-farming managers I think that one non-farming manager per entity is more than generous, and over the years has been much violated. So we just simply say it ought to be one non-farm manager per farm and no more. But it's been a lot worse. In my language, the language accepted by this body, reformed that. But as I've indicated a couple times, the Conference Committee took it out. The language in the bill now says, instead of the way it passed the Senate and passed the House on the floor of the House, we'll have the opportunity to review and fix the actively engaged loophole, but only if they should choose so. In other words, the Secretary of Agriculture doesn't have to. Now, I happen to know that Secretary Vilsack is sympathetic to what I've been trying to accomplish. So maybe he will be able to make something good out of what I think is a very bad provision in this bill that might actually make it very difficult for him to do that. Now, under this provision, USDA could have fixed this problem, or even under existing law, I should say, USDA could have fixed this problem at any point since it is the result of their rulemaking. So giving, as this compromise does, the USDA power they already have and claiming reform, that happens to be a true too often example of a Washington hat trick. The conferees didn't stop at just kicking the decision over to the department. They also tied the USDA's hands with unnecessary requirements that must be met before action can even be taken. And that's why I say it's going to be difficult for Secretary Vilsack. I hope he can find ways to accomplish what I want to accomplish. As I said, I think that's where his heart is. So I hope that Secretary Vilsack, and I can even say the Obama administration, finally use this authority to produce a strong enforceable rule regarding the number of people who can be eligible for farm subsidies from taxpayers. In other words, people that are actually farming. I'm certainly going to offer them my thoughts on this issue. And maybe I should explain why I said even the Obama administration beyond Secretary Vilsack, because in this president's budget more than once, and in the Bush budget more than once, presidents, including this president, has suggested these reforms to save money. This year, I said about $400 million, actually, according to CBO, $387 million. The Government Accountability Office released a report in October 2013 that clearly outlines the problems with the actively engaged loophole. One farming partnership that they highlighted was composed of 22 LLCs with 20 different owners and 16 managers who got their eligibility through the actively engaged loophole. So you understand why the bill that passed the Senate and the House said one manager. At least 4 of the managers I've referred to from that operation even live out of the state, while several others live in cities around the state well outside of commuting distance. Additionally, just yesterday, it was reported that a large farming operation in the state of Illinois is being fined $5 3/10 million because they were exploiting taxpayers for farm subsidies. In this case, the government determined their business structure was intentionally designed to evade those payment limitations that are even in existing law, with the exact fake entity structures that my provisions would have nearly eliminated. I want to quote the U.S. Attorney Jim Lewis, who handled that case. And here's this quote: "We're pleased with this favorable resolution of the government's claim of misuse of farm subsidy programs. These programs are designed to help farmers withstand market price volatility and the intrinsic risks associated with farming from year to year. Any attempt to exploit the system to take more than one's fair share is an improper use of government funds that erodes the public confidence in such programs and threatens their continued viability." End of comment of U.S. Attorney Jim Lewis, who's won that case against these farmers, and they will be fined that $5 3/10, those $5 3/10 million. I wish that the U.S. Attorney could have been part of the Farm Bill Conference Committee. His logic and expertise would have really helped. If a farm's business model depends on lawyers setting up complicated Mickey Mouse legal structures just to get more government subsidies, perhaps the owners of that entity are in the wrong business. So my provisions would have limited subsidies going to a few thousand people who are very well off and, quite frankly, don't need unlimited farm payments from the government and probably aren't even involved with dirt under their fingernails, especially since, by definition, they would be people then who don't actually work on farms. If we can't cut subsidies that go to non-farming millionaires, how will we ever find the courage then to fix other great entitlement problems that we have in this country? With all that said, there are a few things this bill does that are good. The dairy program's provisions have ended up more market-oriented than where we started, which I believe is a very good thing. I'm glad the crop insurance program will remain strong for farmers across the country, and the nutrition program reforms are welcome. In the end, I have to make a judgment of the bill as a whole. Every member of the Senate has to. I believe this bill, sadly, is a missed opportunity. The Congressional Budget Office has the final savings in this bill of only $16 6/10 billion. That's a pretty small amount compared to the fact that it will spend nearly $1 trillion. Now, I think my colleagues know that I'm a sort of person that plays by the rules. So I played by the rules with these reforms that were adopted 2 years ago, 75 to 24, not debated or voted on this year because they were part of the bill that passed the United States Senate and then went to the House of Representatives and were voted on there 230, 194. So we played by the rules. A majority of both bodies support these reforms. Yet, in the end, just a small group of people with a single-minded intent to keep unlimited farm subsidies flowing out the door proved that Congress deserves its 12% approval rating. I want to be clear. I strongly support the business of agriculture. I've been involved in farming my whole life. My son Robin operates our family farm. I understand the industry. Growing wholesome foods to feed the world has always been one of the noblest occupations, in my opinion. But if I were to vote yes on the bill, it would be an endorsement of the egregious manipulation of my payment limitation reforms behind closed doors. I cannot in good conscience do that. Therefore, I will oppose the Agricultural Act of 2014. Just to kind of clarify, do you understand? I hope everybody understands that we had the moral authority of a majority of the Senate, the moral authority of a majority of the House of Representatives, the moral majority of the people of this country who I believe would say it's a good thing to save $387 million. And yet, that moral authority was avoided by conferees who thought, to heck with what the majority of the Senate or a voting majority of the House of Representatives of 230 to 194. It doesn't mean anything. We can do whatever we want to do. We can waste that $387 million. We can continue to give farm payments to farmers who aren't farming or to people who aren't farming. We can continue to let 10% of the biggest farmers get 70% of the benefits of the farm program, which in the end then helps subsidize big farmers getting bigger, and there's nothing wrong with big farmers getting bigger, but you shouldn't subsidize it. Drive up the price of farmland, drive up the price of cash rent, so our young farmers can't get started farming. If you want to preserve the family farm, that's one of the things that's very, very important. So I've said my part, and I hope that I'm around 5 years from now so that I can try this once again, because I don't intend to give up on this process. 5 years from now is the next farm bill, probably. Maybe there will be opportunities between now and then. I intend to take advantage of those opportunities. I yield the floor.
Madam President,
Senator from Arkansas.
I ask that I'm able to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm here today as a voice for our veterans and career military service members. Since I came to Congress in 2001, I have served on the Veterans Affairs Committee, both in the House and the Senate, and have continuously fought to uphold the promises that we have made with the men and women who served on behalf of our nation. I am continually looking for opportunities to improve their lives of our veterans who have served honorably and have sacrificed, sometimes with their lives, in support of our country. They deserve every benefit that they've earned and what we have promised them, but they have suffered a grave injustice in this body. Late last year, the Senate, without my support, agreed to a budget that cut retirement benefits of our veterans, reducing the cost of living adjustment. I certainly could not support this provision. Veterans and the American people are rightly upset. I want to share some of the letters that I've received from our veterans and other Arkansans. David Mullins from Jonesboro wrote, "I'm a 20-year veteran of the United States Army. I retired as a sergeant first class. I am currently drawing military retirement. I joined the Army when I was 18 years old, and I wouldn't do anything different. Even though it was very hard at times, I know that was what I was supposed to be doing. Less than 1% of the American population serves in the military, and of those, only about 13% actually retire with 20 years or more of service. We are talking about less than 0.02% of the population. It is really appalling that after sacrificing my freedoms to protect those of my fellow citizens, this is how we are treated. America is out of touch. I agree with David. In a letter I sent to the Armed Services Committee leadership in the House and Senate, I equated retirement compensation cuts to reaching into these individuals' retirement accounts and taking that money from them. This is unconscionable. Diane from Hot Springs, Arkansas said in a letter, I am truly disgusted by the New Deal that cuts military pensions, but doesn't touch benefits for any of the politicians. I would have no problems if it was across-the-board cut. This is the best example of what is wrong with our government. Cut benefits for those that make real sacrifices for their country. They take lower pay and separation from family. I agree with Diane. It is not fair. Our veterans shouldn't be the ones bearing the burden for irresponsible spending. We need to cut spending and put our country on the path to fiscal responsibility, but it should not come at the expense of our nation's military retirees. These are the only Americans who are being asked to sacrifice under the budget agreement. It's wrong to single out our service members for what amounts to $6 billion over 10 years, representing a 0.02% reduction. We need to right this wrong so our military retirees and their families have one less thing to worry about. Terry Williamson from Jacksonville, Arkansas, wrote, I just retired from 26 years of active duty, serving my country in the Air Force. I must say I was shocked and disappointed to learn that the pay of retirees are being offered up to be reduced by 1% cost of living as part of the budget deal. I feel that I have lived up to and beyond my part in serving my country. I have not even received my first retirement check, and yet already my government is shortchanging me and all veterans who have served and fulfilled their end of the deal. Defending this great nation, I ask you to do what you can to not allow this to happen to a small portion of society that gave more to their country than most. Terry, we're working to make sure you get the full retirement you earned. We're seeking ways to undo this cut and fully restore military pay. In January, Congress took the first step towards restoring veterans' COLAs with the passage of the Omnibus Appropriations Bill. This exempted medically retired disabled veterans and survivors from the COLA reductions. But there's more work to do. The good news is that we're on your side. Senator Ayotte introduced the Keeping Our Promises to Our Military Heroes Act that repeals the COLA reduction for all military retirees, and I'm certainly proud to support that legislation. Arkansans want Congress to fully restore military retiree benefits as soon as possible, and I'm committed to raising this priority at every possible opportunity until justice is realized for these military families. While there's been much discussion about restoring these benefits in future legislation, this should be done at the earliest opportunity in order to provide certainty for our military's retirees' financial future. To our nation's military retirees, I'm committed to this fight. You've earned these benefits. Congress must correct the wrong and restore your full retirement pay. And as always, thank you for your service to our country. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. Madam President,
Majority Leader.
I ask unanimous consent the call to Quorum be terminated.
Without objection.
I now ask the Senate proceed to period of morning business. Senators allowed to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
I ask consent the Senate proceed to S-Res 342.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 342 designating February 3rd through 7th, 2014 as National School Counseling Week.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be laid on the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that during the adjournment of recess of the Senate from Tuesday, January 30th through Monday, February 3rd, the Majority Leader and Senators Warner and Rockefeller be authorized to sign duly enrolled bills or joint resolutions.
Without objection.
I'm told that there's a bill due for its first reading.
The clerk will read the title of the bill for the first time.
S. 1977, a bill to repeal Section 403 of the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2013, and so forth.
I now ask for second reading in order to place the bill on the calendar under the provision of Rule 14, but object to my own request.
Objection is heard.
I now ask unanimous consent when the Senate completes the business day adjourned until 2 p.m. on Monday, February 3rd. Following the prayer and the pledge, the morning hour be deemed expired, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day. Following any leader remarks, the Senate resume consideration of the conference report to accompany H.R. 2642 with the time until 5:30 equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or the designees.
Without objection.
Next roll call vote will be 5:30 on Monday on the motion to invoke cloture on the conference report to the Farm Bill. There's no further business to come before the Senate. I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
The Senate.
The Senate this afternoon voted to approve changes to the 2012 flood insurance bill, delaying federal insurance premium increases for up to 4 years. The final passage